Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Mourning Brew, with me, your host, Lee Petcher. Be advised that this podcast deals with issues of the passing of a loved one and the dealing with grief. So if these issues are upsetting to you at the moment, please come back to us when you feel ready to do so. Remember, you are not on your own. Otherwise, pour yourself a brew, get comfy, and we'll begin. Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Mourning Brew with me, Lee Petcher. Right off the start, guys, I just want to say thank you so much. If you've listened to the previous podcast and you're still here with me now, if you're just joining me for the first time, it really does mean a lot that you're going through this journey with me. And I think it just goes to prove for everyone out there who is going through grief that you're not on your own. There are loads of people there that will be with you on your journey like you are with me, like I am with all you guys as well. So thank you so much. Again, please take heed of the initial trigger warning. We do cover subjects and issues of a sensitive nature in this podcast. It can stir up emotions. I've had a few messages from people before saying, really like it, had to pause it, but I have come back to it. Guys, please don't feel any guilt or shame. Don't apologize for anything that you have to do. Just do you. Do what feels right for you. And if you feel like you can listen to it, absolutely fine. If you need to take a break, go away, make yourself a brew, hence why it's called the Mourning Brew. Do so, come back. I'm not going anywhere for a long time. So please, I'll always be around. So how are we all doing? It is October and my gosh, has this year gone fast. It only seems like yesterday it was March, right? So British summertime has now finished, which means it's dark when I wake up. It means it's dark well before 5 o'clock. So I'm spending most of my day in darkness now. And I'm sure it's the same for a lot of people out there. And these are the times now where grief and mourning and reminiscence all starts to happen. You start to feel low in yourself because you're not getting as much sunlight. And, it is scientific fact that, sun makes us happy. You always feel good on a sunny day. You kind of always feel miserable when it's raining. It's not everybody, but, that's the general consensus, right? So when you're not seeing as much sun, when you're not getting out into the fresh air as much, that's when you start to feel low in yourself. So it's definitely times like this, and especially in the situation that we're in, wherever you're listening to this in the world, COVID is a thing, right? And it doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. Now, whether you believe that it's conspiracy theorists out there saying that it's trying to deflect us from thinking about something else or whatever, the virus is still there. It's still taking lives. So please just be safe for everyone and check in now with your loved ones, because now's the time that they're going to need it. It's cold. I've already mentioned it's dark. Some people who are living on their own, who may not get to speak to people that often. What an age we live in, guys. We live in an age of technology where not only can we just phone our loved ones, but we can see them. Okay, it's not the same as being there in person, and nothing beats human connection, that touch, that hug. But just being able to see and speak to your loved one, it's priceless. And you don't want to get robbed of many of these days. I mean, the situation is a bit difficult. We can't go around, especially to the vulnerable, and touch them or anything like that because of fear of passing on this disease. And if you feel like one of your loved ones is of a higher risk category, then please, I advise against that. But it doesn't stop you phoning them, doesn't stop you Skyping them. They may not be great with technology. Be patient, it's fine. But you will regret not doing it in the long run. And you know what? Nothing beats pen to paper as well. I know a lot of people that would just gladly write a little letter, send it in the post. And who doesn't love receiving mail as long as it's not bills? Am I right? So yeah, just keep in touch with everyone. Keep in touch with me. Straight out of the bat, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at The Mourning Brew. That's morning spelled Mouring. The Mourning Brew, as in if you are in mourning. I'm on Facebook, again, facebook.com/The Mourning Brew, and drop me an email at themourningbrew@gmail.com. Just let me know how you are. Just check in with me, guys. If you're feeling low, I'll be there to support you. If you've got something great to say, boom, let's spend this time spreading as much positivity out into the world as humanly possible. So here we are on episode 4. And as I said from the start, I was going to go through all the deaths or the losses that have affected me the most. I've gone through my grandparents and I've gone through my best friend. I'm coming up to 2 big ones now. And I'm not going to lie to you, because this podcast is all about truth, openness and transparency. I've been putting this one off. I've been putting these next 2 off, if I'm totally honest, because these 2 hurt. And I've put it off for fear of not wanting to upset other people, mainly family members who might listen to this, upset people in my past, upset myself. I wanted the podcast to be perfect. So I was like, I'll put it off. I'll do this research. I'll do this. Anything to not do it. And I think as a species, as humans, we do this quite often. If there is a task that we are not looking forward to doing, we will procrastinate the hell out of it just so that we don't have to do it. And the worst nation in the world is procrastination. Am I right? So yeah, I've been putting it off to the point where I'm leaving it up to the wire. Normally I have this podcast recorded and edited and ready to go by now and just ready to drop on Friday. It is Tuesday as we're speaking, so I've still got a lot of work to do before this goes out, but I'm going to do my best to get it out to you on Friday. So I came to the realization that this podcast is for me. It's for me to help other people. It's for me to be open and honest about what has gone on in my life and how I remember things and how I felt about things. And if that upsets anyone else who may have been around me at that point of time, who didn't realize what I was going through, or even if you discover things that you may not want to hear, then I'm going to be very British about this. I'm going to apologize right now. But I'm also not going to apologize at the same time. I'm sorry that you feel that way, but this is the way that I feel. So another trigger warning before I get stuck into this podcast. If you feel attacked by anything I might say, if you feel that I'm giving out misinformation, please know that I'm not doing so intentionally. It is not my intention to hurt anybody out there. You may hear things about my past, my family, that you didn't want to hear. And you may think of me or other people in a different light after this. And that's fine, because this isn't about you. This is about me. And if you don't want to continue, please turn off now and come back in a couple of episodes once I have cleansed in a way. And if you have nothing to do with me, like you don't know me personally, and you feel like this is a bit too much, that's absolutely fine. But I'm going to say it again for the 3rd time. This is me being open and honest. And how can I expect other people out there to be as open and honest about what they're going through if I'm going to sugarcoat my experiences, if I'm going to hold things back? And that's not what I'm going to do. So you're going to learn a lot about me in these next 2 episodes. So this episode is about my dad, Joseph Robert Petcher. My dad was born on the 20th of February, 1941. He died on the 12th of January, 2009. He was 68 years old. Now, from other podcasts, you kind of know the beginning of this story. My dad was married before my mum. He was married twice before my mum. He had, in total, 7 children that we know about. And I say that as a jest, because that's the kind of thing that people used to say about my dad. This is the kind of thing my mum used to say about him. Oh, well, there's only 7 that I know about. But, he kept me secret for a long time. And it wasn't until his second wife passed that I was brought into the family. My mum never passed when my dad was around. So is there a secret family out there? Honestly, I don't know. I'd like to think not. But, strange things have happened, right? So his first wife was a woman called Josephine. And with Josephine, my dad had 2 girls and 4 boys. Now, it's going to get complicated from the get-go here. And again, I've gone into this in a past podcast. One of the boys has flat out refused to believe that my dad is his dad, despite what family have told me. Many, many family have told me. I don't know if he refuses to believe it or refuses to acknowledge it, I think is a better word. And it is because of this that I have never seen him. Never met him, should I say. I did see him at my grandma's funeral, never spoke to him. Then my dad married another woman, Marilyn, to which he had another boy. This is my brother Russell, who I'm hoping to get on the podcast at some point. He's 10 years older than me, is Russell. And as I have said, my dad was having an affair on Marilyn with my mum. And it wasn't until Marilyn passed that I was then brought into the family. So that makes 7 of us. I'm the youngest of 7. My upbringing was always one of a complicated nature. A lot of my brothers and sisters, or half brothers and sisters, were so much older than me that they had gone and left the nest and had families of their own. In fact, when I was born an uncle, which trying to explain that to people at your age when you're only a kid is very, very weird. I have nephews and nieces that are older than me, and it's a big family. Now, since my dad's passing, I've kind of drifted away from a lot of my stepbrothers and sisters, so I don't know how many kids they have. I don't know how many kids their kids have. All I can say for certain is, the 7 that my dad had. And say what you want, I know there was a bit of bad blood between my dad and the first 5 children. Don't know what exactly, just rumours that I've heard. But I know my dad loved his kids. He did. And he loved his grandkids. Every single one he loved. And that made me feel a bit jealous when I was younger, because I didn't have that to give to him. It's one of my issues now that I never gave him a grandchild, because seeing him play with the grandkids the way that I kind of wanted him to play with me, it was nice to see, but upsetting. So in my dad's past, he was a teddy boy, a rock and roller. My dad was very, very intelligent. He got into Bradford Grammar, and I don't think many people did in those days. In fact, I found when cleaning up his stuff that he actually was a part of Mensa as well, and that blew my mind. He was very, very intelligent, but my recollection of him was always working these working class jobs. He was a tarmacker. He was not a plumber as such. He worked in sewage. In fact, that's what turned his hair green in my mum and dad's wedding photo. He'd just pick up jobs left, right and centre. Driver, delivery man, just anything he could just to support his family. He was so hard working. And I think I got my work ethic from him. He wouldn't stop. I say he wouldn't stop. When clocking off was there, he'd stop and he'd go to the pub. He used to tell me that he would go to the pub since he was, 16, go and have 3 pints and then go home. And, that was his life, and he got into that routine, and he was doing that up until the day he died. In fact, the very day he died, he was at this pub having his pints, and he actually left early, which is unusual for him. And as he was crossing the road, because he didn't live far from this pub, it was literally over a road. It wasn't even a busy road, it was just a road. And he was crossing the road, and he collapsed. Well, he died. And on his death certificate, it says he died of coronary artery thrombosis and coronary artery disease. So basically just a heart attack. And that bothers me a lot. Most people, when they pass, again, I'm generalising, but for me, the people who have died, barring Clint, have died in their sleep. But to know that he was going home to have his tea, he died alone. It was January, it was cold, and he had no one around him. To think that he was alone. And I don't know if it was sudden. I don't know if he knew what was happening. But I hate that. I hate thinking that anyone has to leave this world alone. And there were some teenagers on the road who found him, bless them, and they were trying to phone for an ambulance or a doctor, and when someone came by, the police came, and they confiscated the phones because they thought they were taking photos of him, and they weren't. They were just trying to get him some help. And I found a newspaper clipping of my mum writing into the paper, just thanking those kids. And it's a long shot. It's a very long shot, but if anybody knows those people who on January the 12th in 2009 saw somebody die, that might have been my dad. And thank you for all that you did. And I can only imagine what seeing that must have done for you guys. Because I've never seen someone die. I've seen people die in films, but it's not the same, is it? So getting back to my dad, yeah, he was a rock and roller, a teddy boy. He loved music. Music was his life. He was in bands for forever. Whenever I speak to any of his brothers and sisters, of which, he's the eldest of 7. So when I speak to them, they always tell me about how he'd always have the guitar out and play them songs and things like that. He was best friends with a guy called Dave Lee, and they started a band together. And according to rumour, they entered a competition at St. George's Hall in Bradford, and they got through to the final round of this competition. I can't for the life in me remember the name of the competition, but they got through to this final round, and it was them and Kiki D in the final. To cut a long story short, it was a clapometer that judged who won or not, and Kiki D won. My dad's 15 seconds of fame, was that close. He could have signed a record deal. But he never stopped. He played music. Again, up until the day he died, he always had a guitar. Maybe not so much in bands anymore, especially when he moved to Mablethorpe, but he definitely bought himself a guitar. I've got it in my front room. Growing up around him, there was always some kind of music playing. He introduced me to Buddy Holly, Lonnie Donegan, Mark Knopfler, Eric Clapton, the greats. And I thank him for a music knowledge and appreciation that I have now. And that's all because of him. And he was a front man. There's a video of my mum and dad's 50th and 60th birthday, respectively, where he's on stage and he just lights up the room. And, I watched that DVD quite a lot just to hear him sing and to see him move. Because pictures are great when they're the only thing that you've got left. But video, it kind of captures his soul a little bit. And I can still see that spark in him, especially when he's entertaining a crowd. And the camera pans round and I see my mum and I see my grandma, and I watch that DVD on purpose when I want to feel close to him, when I want to feel something again. And I guess there are people out there that do the same thing with your loved ones. You'll find something and, people say, why are you watching that if it's going to make you cry? And I guess my answer to that is, it's good. It means I still care. It means I still love. It means I've not forgotten them. I went to Kirkby Lonsdale recently for my girlfriend's 30th birthday, and we walked through this church to get to this view, which was a beautiful view. But in this church, there's a graveyard. And I look around at these graves and I think, someone's buried under there. And at one point, these graves were frequented a lot. But that generation is gone now, and nobody frequents these graves anymore, and it's just overrun. I mean, it's not horribly overrun, there's not weeds and stuff everywhere, but there's no new flowers, it's not been cleaned. The grass around it has been cut, but no care has been taken over it anymore. And I think, I'd rather have this DVD, because then I can watch that and I don't have to go to a grave. I've got that's in my house, and I can pass that on to my kids, and they can pass that on to their kids if they want. And technology is going to evolve, but there's going to be a way to adapt a DVD to whatever kind of digital future we have. And they can see their grandparents, because they're never going to meet them, but they can hear them. They can hear their voice. I can't hear my grandma and granddad Smith's voice. I can't, because I never heard it. I never had any video of that. So I'm truly grateful for that technology. And I'm grateful that my dad found a love for that technology early on. He bought a camera, I think, as soon as they came out. And again, when I was going through all of his stuff, there was bags and bags of cassette tapes of just things that he'd recorded, things that I'd forgotten about. And I watched them back when my mum died. And there was gradings there of my karate years. There was R. Russell's band playing. There was my school shows. There was holidays. And I watched this one clip where my dad, he sounded really disappointed in me for something that I'd done. And I think it was a grading. And that stung. See, yeah, Like I say, music was his life and being the entertainer. And I think that's where I got my entertaining gene from. My uncle Stephen is an actor, but no one in my family around me is an actor as such. My dad was music and Russell's love was music, which segues onto like my early life with my dad. My younger days were hard and I never understood why. Me and Russell were always in competition with each other. It seemed like my dad favoured him. And my dad had to protect him because his mum had died on Christmas Day of all the days. And I think that I never knew how much it affected my dad, barring this little thing. He did. I can't lie. He favoured our Russell. Everything Russell did, I had to do. Russell did karate. I had to do karate. Russell played guitar. I had to play guitar. I wanted to learn to play the drums. I'm not going to lie. I went into middle school in year 5 and there was this rule that only year 6s and above could play the drums. I went in on a playtime. I snuck into the music room and I started bashing about on this drum set. The music teacher came in and I thought, holy crap, that's it. Detention now for the rest of my school life. And he was like, who was that? I said, it was me. I'm here with the drumsticks. I can't lie. Can't get out of this one. And he said, you've got a natural rhythm. I'm going to send a letter back to your mum and dad. I'm going to see if we can get you music lessons now. And I was like, cool, loved it. And my dad said, nah, you're not learning that shit. And he gave me a guitar to play. Russell got a massive review in the school play. I had to do the same. That's why I became an actor. Every Christmas dinner, we would sit round a table and my dad would always tell this story about Russell playing bottom in the school play and the review he got in the paper. And I resented him for that. So as soon as I could, when I got to the same upper school that Russell went to, I tried out for the school play, got it in the second year and I got a review. Everything I did, I tried to do to please my dad. Not to better Russell, but to better Russell, if that makes any sense. I studied hard and got good grades. Russell went to Whoopsie Middle School. I went to Whoopsie Middle School. Russell went to Wycliffe Mount Upper. I went to Wycliffe Mount Upper. My dad got Russell driving lessons to learn to drive a car. He never did. I did. Russell did karate, never got his black belt. I got my black belt, but nothing I could do could ever seem to please my dad. Russell went on tour with a really good band. And my dad was so proud. He'd go to his gigs and he'd wear the shirt and go backstage. And yet, when I told my dad I wanted to be an actor, he didn't scoff so much, but he became really pleased when I got my first job in a bank. Because I was stable then. And that hurt. My childhood with my dad. This is where the big, if you don't want to listen, turn off now, comes in. People say don't speak ill of the dead. Only remember the good times. And that's fine. But remember, no one in this life is perfect. Everyone has their flaws. Everyone. And some of my dad's flaws are the biggest influences in my life. Now, what I'm about to say doesn't mean I don't love my dad. I love him with all my heart. But he was horrible when I was younger. He used to drink, and my mum used to drink, and then there would be arguments. And I would see my mum black and blue. In fact, one of the earliest memories I have is of an ambulance coming to pick up my mum, the police coming to pick up my dad, and our Russell locked in his room upstairs. And I swore to myself I would never be like that. And I knew that was going on for a long time, and I couldn't do anything about it. And it was all behind closed doors. And I'm not saying my dad instigated all of it. He didn't. I'm not saying my mum was to blame for all of it. She wasn't. They were both as bad as each other. And I'm not condoning it. By any stretch of the imagination, I'm not condoning it. And I asked my mum, why don't you just leave? And she said, because I love him. And that hurt on different levels. It hurt because I couldn't protect my mum. And it hurt because my dad, a hero of mine, could do this. And my mum was paranoid that my dad was having an affair on her with somebody else. I mean, if he had an affair before he could do it again. And all these things, since growing up myself and learning more about myself, I realise why I am the way that I am. But despite all the bad things, there was a shit ton of good. My best memory of my dad is when I was younger, he promised to take me to a Leeds United match, and it was raining, and I'd been out in town with a friend, but I made a real effort to get back on time because I love spending time with my dad. My dad didn't really spend that much time with me when I was a kid. He was always down the pub or working. So when I got to spend time with him, I cherished it. And this is something that we could share together. And he took me to this Leeds United match, even though he was full of flu. He was awful. He couldn't breathe. He was coughing. He was sneezing. He'd dressed himself up in this big green, like, fisherman's jacket, scarf all around him. He had this hip flask full of whiskey just to, like, take the edge off. And even though I said, Dad, we don't have to go, I mean, yeah, I was upset. But I was like, no, you come first. It's like, no, I promise you. I promised you. And he took me to the match. And I remember just being in the stadium with him and looking at him, and my eyes just full of pride. And anybody who looked at him that night would have thought he was just a homeless man off the street. And they wouldn't have looked twice. But he never looked so good to me. And yes, I tell you this story, even though it makes me cry. Because even though there is shit memories, there is some shit fucking memories. There are some fucking great ones too. And I guess what I'm trying to say to you guys is, it's okay that there are shit memories. Try not to think of them often, but they will come up. But I think it can be just as damaging trying to erase all those shit memories and pretend that they didn't happen, because then the person becomes infallible, and nobody is infallible. You've got to remember them for the flaws. There's reasons why things happened. And if I didn't have the shit times with my dad, I wouldn't have had the good. I mean, the good would still have been there. I wouldn't have appreciated it half as much. Yeah, I can understand why there's animosity between my family and my dad, mainly my brothers. I can understand because I was there. I didn't bolt out of there. I stuck around, and when I could, I fought back. And me and my dad had this weird relationship for a while, and it wasn't until like the year before he passed did he sit me down in a pub one Christmas, and we just hashed it out. It wasn't even an argument, it was just a discussion. And he admitted things to me, and he apologised to things that he'd done, and he told me he loved me. And I wish he had that chance to say that to all of his kids. And that's just his life. When he passed, it was a Monday. I was at a rehearsal for a pantomime. It was a dance call. And me and my dad used to speak quite regularly on the phone. But he knew not to call me on a Monday or a Wednesday because I'd be at rehearsals. But he called me this particular Monday. And I looked at the phone and I remember saying, I can't right now, Dad. Didn't answer it, and I carried on with the rehearsal, thinking I'd call him back when I got home. And when I got home, I don't know, it slipped my memory to call him because I was living with a girlfriend at the time, and she was also in the pantomime with me. So we were just having a laugh about, what had happened. And then I got a phone call from my mum's number, and I answered it. Then it kind of clicked that, oh yeah, need to speak to my dad. So I said, hi, Mum. But there was just silence in the end. It's Mum. And then sobs. I hate hearing my mum cry. And then there was a bit of a tussle, a bit of a struggle with the neighbour going, give it to me, give it to me. Hi, what's going on? And she was like, Lee, your dad's died. As blunt as that. Lee, your dad's died. And it's funny, you watch films and you think you know how you have to react when you hear that, because it's so... need to take a pause. Tears start flooding and you start yelling and screaming, but it's not like that. It's not. I got angry. And I was like, is this a joke? What kind of fucking sick joke's this? She's like, I'm not. It's not. Your dad's died. And then my mum came back on the phone. You could hear like the tussle again. She just grabbed the phone and she's like, your dad's gone. And it sunk in. And I cried. But I'd had a drink and I wasn't going to risk driving from Bradford down to Mablethorpe at that time of night having a drink. So I made sure my mum was all right, and I went to see my brother because he only lived, 10 minutes down the road from me. And that night we drank and we cried. Me, Russell and my girlfriend. Well, not so much my girlfriend, she wasn't drinking, but me and Russell did. And I made a plan that the next morning I was going to get up and just drive. And that's what we did. Me and Russell went down. And one of my other brothers, he was living in Mablethorpe at the time. He'd come round. And we were just a mess, all of us. And memory's fickle, man. Memory's really, really weird. I tried to look it up on the internet, like what exactly is memory? And it turns out that when you remember something, you're not actually remembering the event. What you're doing is you're remembering the last time you remembered that event. You're remembering the memory. And every time you do that, that's what's happening. So things change. So this whole thing is a kind of a blur because I can't remember. I remember Russell being there the whole time that I was there. I remember Barry being there the whole time that I was there. He may not have slept over, but it was me and Barry at night, and he would do whatever he could to try and take my mind off of it. And we would watch these funny Jeff Dunham videos on YouTube, and we would listen to these funny prank phone calls from Tiny Tim. And that's all we'd do. But during the day, I don't remember Russell. And I don't really remember Barry being there throughout the day. It kind of fell on me. I'm the youngest of 7. I was 23 at this point, 22, 23. And I had to sort it out for my mum. I had to work out what to do about reporting the death, what to do with her benefits and pension and Sky and bills. And I had to sort out the funeral. But not only that, I had to sort the funeral out for it to happen in Bradford, to be around my dad's family rather than Mablethorpe where they were now. And I couldn't have done it without my best friend Johnny. He was a rock for me at that point. He got me in touch with these places because we both worked at the same bank and we knew people, and got with this really nice family funeral directors, and they were amazing. But it was me and Johnny, and one of my sisters came down to be there for my mum and distract my mum and drive my mum wherever she needed to go and things like that. But all that pressure fell on me. And the first night I was there, I had to tell people. And that's weird. Having to go into all these pubs and clubs, finding people that my dad used to drink with. Because my dad, as I've mentioned before, was always the life of a party. You could go into any pub and he would know somebody there. So all these places I had to go in and just inform people what had happened. I mean, people knew something had happened. It's a small town. Rumours fly. But it was up to me. Every time I said the words, he's dead. My dad's passed. My dad's gone. Killed me more and more. And it was taking a real physical toll on me. And at one of the last places I was speaking to my dad's best friend in Mablethorpe at the time, and I had to tell him, and all his family was there. And my dad loved his family as well. And his daughter said, "You need to drink." And I was like, no, I need to do this. She's like, "No, you've done enough. Now, this is hurting you. I'm taking you out and I'm taking your mind off this." And she did. She took me to every nightclub, bar, anywhere that was serving. She bought me drinks all night. We just got hammered. And I ended up kissing her that night. And again, I don't condone cheating, but I did. I kissed another girl whilst my girlfriend was back at home. Now, my girlfriend was either at university at the time or she had just started a new job as a nurse and she couldn't get the time off. So I don't blame her for not being there. But when my family weren't necessarily there for me and I needed someone, she was there. I just needed companionship and she was there. So look at me in a completely different way. And like I said at the beginning of these podcasts, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. You do what you have to do in that time. There's a healthy and an unhealthy way. This was an unhealthy way. Should not have done it. But I did. And for anybody who is also grieving, who needs that connection, or may have done something very, very similar and now feel absolutely shit because of that, I'm here to say you're not alone. I'm not going to judge you. Jesus Christ, I did it. And it's all right for other people to sit there and judge and go, I'd never do that. Fuck me, if you're not in that situation, you don't know. And again, I'm not making excuses. I'm not trying to buy my way out of this. I'm not. It was just one of those things. It happened, and I can't take it back. Speaking of unhealthy ways as well to deal with my dad's passing, I got into a really bad habit of drinking a bottle of whiskey, Jack Daniels, every night. From the first night that we landed in Mablethorpe through to a good 2-3 months later, I drank a bottle of JD every night. And I don't mean a big bottle, and I don't mean one of those tiny little shot bottles. I mean like a medium-sized bottle of whiskey every night. I needed that. I needed that to knock me out, to not think about anything, to take away that pain. And I was drinking throughout the day. Do I condone this? No. Again, going back to what I said, there's no right or wrong way. Now, you may think getting drunk every night is a wrong way to do it. Maybe so for you guys, but I needed sleep. I needed sleep. I needed to be able to function the next day. Now, I wasn't becoming an alcoholic. I didn't need drink to function. I needed drink to sleep. So I would drink until I passed out. And then when I woke up in the morning, I could be strong again for my family because that's what they needed. They needed me. I needed that. And I just didn't put it down at the end. I should have done, but I didn't. And it carried on and it became a little bit of a habit. But I stopped. I knew that I was heading down a dark road if I was to continue doing this. Like I mentioned before in the podcast, my mum used to drink, my dad used to drink. I didn't want to be that person. So on my own terms, I stopped. I went sober for a year, barring the one drink that I raised for my dad on his anniversary. I went sober for a year because I didn't need it. But at the time, I did. So yes, there's no right or wrong way, but there's a healthy and an unhealthy way. The healthy way for me to have gotten sleep maybe would have been to get sleeping tablets. But then you run the risk of becoming addicted to them too. Do you see what I mean? You've got to do what's right for you, what's right at the time. And everything in moderation is fine. Just don't let it get past that. Or if it does, learn when to catch it. Learn to listen to people who are offering you help. Learn from your own body when it says, this isn't right now. You have to deal with this a different way. So those 2 weeks in Mablethorpe were challenging. Seeing my dad's body for the first time, it wasn't even in a funeral home. He hadn't been dressed. He hadn't had the makeup on. He was on this cold slab. And we all had the choice of whether we wanted to go in and see him or not. I mean, the body had already been identified, but we had that choice. And I had to. I had to make sure that no one had made a mistake. Because until you see it with your own 2 eyes, don't believe it. And I remember going up to him and kissing him on his forehead. And the only way I can describe what it felt like was kissing a really cold milk bottle. One that's just come out of the fridge. It was that smooth against his skull and that cold. And he didn't look like him. Later, when I saw him at the funeral home, when we'd got him dressed in his comfies, because he wasn't going out in a suit, he was going to have his jeans and jumper. He looked more like him, and people who work in funeral homes do a fantastic job. God knows I couldn't do that. But it was just so clinical. And then came the funeral. Well, beforehand, I feel like I have to say, know your rights. At work, guys, please know your rights. I was given 2 weeks of compassionate leave And that was me down in Mablethorpe, sorting everything out. My dad's funeral fell outside of that 2 weeks. The place I was working at wouldn't let me take that as compassionate. I either had to take a holiday or call in sick. That is wrong. It's wrong on every level. I was so angry. And it turns out, I found out a few years later, that it is manager's discretion. She could have given me that as compassionate leave. She didn't. And I will go into a podcast a bit later on down the line, guys, of what to do when someone's passed, what you need to do, and your rights and things like that, because I think that would be very beneficial for people, because I wish I knew that. I had to sort all this out on the fly. Google, I had my friend in Bradford asking this funeral director things and just asking questions, and yeah, it can be a lot. It can be daunting. So I'll try and get an episode together of everything that you need to cover. So the funeral came, and it was packed, and that was great. Again, my dad was the life and soul of the party. Everybody loved him, and that was evident in how many people turned up. And my uncle got to choose the music, because you get 3 songs. One when the coffin's brought in, one midway through the service, and one as you're all leaving. And one of the songs that we had asked to be played was Knocking on Heaven's Door by Bob Dylan. And it wouldn't play. No matter how many times, it wouldn't play. And they tried it beforehand and they tried it after, and it worked both times. But during the funeral, it wouldn't play. And, I like to think that that was my dad going, well, if I'm not playing it, no one is. That was one of his songs that he used to play all the time. And I was there at the funeral, keeping an eye out for 2 of my brothers that, well, one of them, already, as we said, he refuses to acknowledge that my dad's his dad. So, keeping an eye out for him to see if he'd turn up. And another one who, long history, nobody wanted him there. I heard he was there in the background, whether he was or not, I don't care now, but at the time, I didn't want him there. And then it kind of fell on me to give eulogy for my dad, because I was the actor. So I did. I asked my brother beforehand if he wanted to say something, and he said no, but he did, which is fine. I'm glad he did. They were closer than I was. And then from that day through to 5 years later, I didn't cry. I couldn't. I tried everything. Tried watching sad things, listening to sad music, stuff that me and my dad had watched, stuff that reminded me of him, and I couldn't cry. Nothing got me going. And it wasn't until I went to drama school, and the principal of the drama school sat me down one evening, and basically she just said, it's not your fault, over and over again. And that broke that cycle. And for the first part of that, I was like, I'm a man, I don't cry. And then I started to get worried because I wasn't crying, and people were getting worried for me because I wasn't showing that side of my emotion, and I just couldn't. I put it down to the fact that I had to be strong. From finding out that my dad had passed through to the funeral, I had to be strong for everybody else. And because I was for that amount of time, I couldn't put it down. I had to carry on being strong for my mum, for my family. And that's a lot of pressure to put on yourselves. And again, I know people out there that will be doing the same thing. Take that pressure off. It's not all on you. There are other people there to help you. Whether you've got friends or family, or just need a support worker or whoever, there are people out there to take that off of you. And guys, I recommend therapy. There was a time after my dad died that apparently my work slipped. How much of that I believe, I don't know. But I signed myself off sick with depression, and I got private therapy through the company I was working for. And even though we were there to talk about my dad, it turned into a different conversation. But, I've had these therapy sessions since, and I've spoken about it since, which is why I'm able to open up to you guys now about it, because think of it like a bag of rocks that you're carrying, and every now and again you get to empty one rock and carry on walking, and empty another rock and carry on walking until it all becomes bearable again. Every 12th of January, I now go out to a pub or wherever. I will buy a Tetley's beer if I can, if they've got it on offer. If not, it will always be a bitter. I'm a lager drinker normally, but I will buy a bitter and I will toast my dad. I have done for the past 11 years and I will continue to do so. And there was times when I would tell people and there were times when I wouldn't. I'd keep it to myself. Guys, don't keep things to yourself. It doesn't help. It's not good for your own well-being. You know, people can laugh and scorn or whatever. Some people don't celebrate their loved ones moving on whatsoever. People have forgotten it, you know, and everyone does it differently. But I do. I remember, and I will do for my mum. You've got to do what's right for you. And if that is raising a drink to loved ones no longer here, then so be it. And still now, when I raise a glass to my dad and I remember him, I remember the good times, which I've spoken about. But the one thing I can't seem to shake is that phone call. As I mentioned, he never called me. On a Monday, he knew not to call me, and yet he did. And I play back different scenarios in my head. Did he know what was going to happen? Was he in pain? Was he trying to get in touch with me so I can get in touch with my mum? Or I don't know. You know, and I regret not answering that call. And they say you shouldn't have regrets. I mean, I don't know anything. That call could have been anything. It could have been him just telling me about his day, but I'll never know. And I guess it's easy for people to say, you know, don't think about it. There's nothing you could do about it. You never answered it. You're never going to know. And for you to always have a positive outcome of what could have been. But it's never like that, is it? Yes, I like to have believed that he was phoning me up to tell me he loved me. I would have liked to have believed that he didn't know what was happening. But unfortunately, I'll never know. This has been an extremely long episode of the Mourning Brew. I knew it would be. Next episode, I feel, is going to be just as long. And I, again, kind of apologise, but not really, because this is me being open and honest with all you guys out there. If anything, what I've said sparks with you, then I'm doing my job right. And that's why I set up this podcast. So before I go, I want to say again, please just reach out to me at The Mourning Brew on Instagram and Twitter. Facebook.com/The Mourning Brew on Facebook. And themourningbrew@gmail.com. And remember, we're spelling morning, MOURING. We're putting you back in morning. Please, if you're listening on Apple, drop me a rating, drop me a review, because that helps me see what you're liking, what you're not liking, and it helps spread the message out there. And guys, if you are listening to this, thank you for staying with me for so long. But please share this with people who are going through the same thing, people who you think might need to hear this, people who you think are going through things alone. Let them know that they're not. Let them know that I'm here. And if you're going through this, please know that you're not alone. I'm here. So I ended last podcast with a poem that I found on the internet. This poem I wrote for my dad, and I read it out at his funeral. Joseph Robert was born the eldest to Margaret and Joe. He had 2 sisters and 4 brothers. He loved you all, I know. Our Bobby was quite intelligent. He attended grammar school, you know. But did he use education well? It could be argued, no. See, Bobby was a teddy boy. He loved his rock and roll. And when he played, he brought houses down. At least, that's what I've been told. Sure enough, he was a front man, his audience far from bored. But I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm sure he only knew 3 chords. Aside from that, he was a trucker, lived most of his life on the road. He enjoyed travelling to different places, and there was always a story to be told. Now, Dad, he was a drinker. You all know how he loved his beer. Down in the pub with all of his mates, he'd be the one that you could hear. Now, Bob, he would have done anything to help out anyone, but most of all, he was always there for his wife, his daughters, and his sons. Lest not we forget his grandkids or his great-grandkids he talked so much about. He loved you all very dearly. Of this, please, I have no doubt. He bought a laptop recently. Tried to keep up with the times, he said. But honestly, I think he should have stuck with the pen and paper instead. Now his handwriting was illegible. In fact, it's fair to say, atrocious. But what do you do when he phones you up to ask, what type of cheese do I feed my mouse? This was Bobby Petcher. And to speak honestly of his life, I've tried. But on Monday, the 12th of January 2009, it was the day my music died. Thank you all for listening.